Hey friend, Graham here from recordingrevolution.com, and today let's talk about what I was afraid to bring up again, analog summing, and why it's not the answer to your mixes problems. Okay, if you don't know what analog summing is, we'll start there briefly, but then let's just get into the simple truth about analog summing. And if you are someone who does analog summing, I'm not hating on you, so just maybe watch the video before you leave me an angry comment. That was a giant assumption. Maybe you're nice, and hopefully you are, because most of you are cool. But there's a couple, it's YouTube. Let's be honest. When you have a mix, you've got multiple tracks, 24 tracks, like we talked about in the last video, 50 tracks, 100 tracks, 8 tracks, doesn't matter. At some point, once you've mixed them and processed them individually, they all have to sum together or add together into a stereo file that then you can spit out as an MP3 or WAV or whatever you want to do to release the music, right? We listen to music as stereo files, not as multi-track, 24-track files. So the idea of summing is just the adding together of all the tracks. Now, in the olden days, this process used to only happen through an analog console. That was just the way it was. You had individual tracks, and literally the wiring and all of the flow and signal flow would take all of that and it would add all those signals together into a stereo file at the end that you could print to your tape or even print into digital or whatever. But the combining of the multiple tracks coming off the tape through the console or even coming off of Pro Tools through the console was being added together or summed together in the analog domain. And that's the only way we knew how to do it. And then when Pro Tools came along and all the many DAWs came along after that, we realized, oh, we can do this all digitally. And the problem was that in those early years, when you would take a mix in Pro Tools and sum it all together, it's all happening in the digital domain with ones and zeros. And the math and the adding it together gave what many people felt was a sterile or cold result. Some people didn't like digital at all, period, recording or mixing into it. But even those who liked digital and thought the sound was fine on a track by track level found that when you summed it all together, when you bounced to disk in Pro Tools speak and got your stereo file at the end, you rendered it down, you had a less desirable result. And so there have become really clever solutions where you can have a hybrid approach and you could buy something like a dangerous two bus. And this device allows you to spit out either pairs of groups of tracks, like your drum tracks, your bass tracks, your vocals tracks, or if you got enough of these boxes, you can take and enough outputs on your rig, you can take the actual audio out on an individual track by track or instrument by instrument level into the analog domain, plug them into this box, which is like a mini kind of console in a box, just for the sake of summing them together in the analog domain. So they're now added together through wire and not through ones and zeros. And then that spits out an analog stereo signal that you pump back into your DAW through your audio interface to print or record to a stereo audio file. But the math portion, the adding of all your sonic information is happening together in the analog domain. And so this was a clever device that solved that problem for many people. And there are many people that use these analog summing boxes or analog summing consoles just for summing, not for doing all the mixing, but just for the adding it together. And I only bring this up because in doing Recording Revolution for a decade now, there it comes in ebbs and flows, and it's been happening lately again. The conversation's been coming up again, which is this: Graham, I'm not happy with my mixes, the way they sound. I keep hearing about analog summing. Should I buy an analog summing box? And these could be a couple $1,000s. They could be a lot more. It just depends on what you buy. And what I hate about the question is its inherent flaw of blame shifting. The truth is, before we jump into this quick little final segment of this debate to end the debate, the truth is if your mix sounds bad, it's because you're not great at mixing yet. But you will be if you do the only thing that will make you better at mixing, which is mix a crap ton more. We get better the more we do. Now, there are all kinds of tips and tricks and strategies. Just look at my YouTube channel. Just look at all my friends' YouTube channels. There's so many people putting out great content. You are living through the best time period to make music, to learn how to mix, to maybe skip some of the frustration and heartache that many of us had to go through while not knowing what the heck we were doing. But you still can't shortcut the process of greatness by just buying an analog summing box. And the reason I know this for a fact is because analog summing is just like any other piece of gear. It's not the reason your mix is good or bad. It's just a tool. I have a lot of mixing heroes. Okay. These are people who I think just do phenomenal work. And when I looked at the landscape of people who I think mix phenomenally, I looked at whether they mix in the box, which is all digital, or if they use analog summing. And you know what's interesting? It kind of is 50-50. For example, one of my mixing heroes, Dave Pensato, I've been honored to be on his show a few years back. If you want to check that out, mixes in the box. No analog summing. Guys like Charles Dye, mixing in the box. Even my buddy Kevin Ward over at mixcoach.com, who's just a phenomenal mixer and has been for years, mixes in the box. So you've got Grammy Award winning and Dove Award winning mix engineers who don't use analog summing, and they somehow do it all in their software and it sounds good enough to win a Grammy. I guess analog summing isn't the reason your mixes are bad. But on the flip side, I have friends that swear by mixing through analog summing mixers. One of my mixing heroes, Fab Dupont, who runs a great website called puremix.net, which you should check out. And he's been one of my earliest friends in this space, is an award-winning mix engineer who loves the hybrid approach and has mixed through analog summing for years because he swears by it. And his mixes are phenomenal. Mixer Man. Go read Zen and the Art of Mixing, one of the best books on mixing, period. Swears by analog summing, and his mixes are phenomenal. And interestingly enough, one of my all-time mixing heroes, Andrew Sheps, used to swear by mixing through a analog summing box, or specifically through his Neve console, because he happened to own one doing the same thing. Said you absolutely got to mix through a console. He shifted on the subject and just now mixes entirely in the box on his laptop, sometimes on headphones. So he's even flip-flopped. The point is this: I am not upset at you if you have an analog summing box. I'm not upset at you if you think it's the reason your mixes sound good, although I would try to say don't be so hard on yourself. If your mixes sound good, it's because you're good, my man. But the point is to show that we've got some great mixers who, yes, use analog summing. And they're winning awards, and their records are on the radio, and they sound phenomenal. And then we have mixers who do it all in the box, and they've won awards, and their mixes are on the radio, and they sound phenomenal. To me, that's just so obvious that the common denominator is not an analog summing box. It is what? Them. The reason their mixes are good is because they are good. The reason someone who mixes through an analog summing box and gets a great mix is good is because they are good. It's just them. You can never blame the gear, and you can never let the gear take credit either. It's always you all the time. So analog summing, this could be swapped out for any piece of gear that you think is the magic bullet. There is no magic bullet. So just don't let yourself get caught up in that thinking. Especially don't blow money on a piece of gear if you think it's going to take your mixes to the next level. Just get better at mixing. And then buy the gear you want to buy because you think it'll help you, or you enjoy using it, or you like the workflow. But don't whine and complain that your mixes sound bad because you don't have an analog summing box, or fill in the blank with whatever piece of gear, because you know what? You shortchange yourself an opportunity to grow and get better at your craft. So I want to leave you with two things. One, if you want a plan to actually get better sounding recordings and mixes that doesn't cost you a penny, why don't you download my 6 Steps to a Radio Ready Song Guide? Because it's free, and if you read it and apply it, you will get better sounding tracks, period, and it won't cost you a penny. The link is below in the description box, and it's right here on the screen, radioreadyguide.com. It's gonna help you out. It's gonna get you what you're looking for without you having to shell out any money. And two, leave me a comment below And let us know, do you mix in the box or do you use an analog summer of some kind? Either one. Either you mix totally in the box, aka just through your software, or you use a console or analog summer. I'd like to know. Let me know in the comments below and we can have a discussion. As always, thanks for liking this video. Thanks for subscribing to the channel. It means a ton. And I'll see you on another video real soon.